York City, you know, and really looking forward to learning more about this. It's amazing to me the work that you're able to do. It's really, I don't know, really important. There should be much more of it, and there should be much more knowledge about what you're doing. And if we see we can help that way, let people know, and then I'll be learning myself.
Okay.
Welcome, welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Nancy Aossey, and she's the president and CEO of a very, very interesting organization called the International Medical Corps, and they do absolutely wondrous work, if I may say so, around the world in terms of relief and distressed areas of the world. And Nancy, welcome very, very much.
Thank you very much, Harold. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure to Conversations and to Manhattan Network. We want to talk about the IMC, and it's a really important work that they do, but I wonder, maybe we could begin, if you don't mind, maybe we could begin with your own background, because I understand you came from the mid part of the country, out there in Iowa somewhere.
That's right.
And then maybe your own background, then we'll bring it in, because you've been associated, as I understand, with the IMC for almost from its beginning, but maybe share your own background, if you could, please.
Oh, sure. Well, as you say, I was born and raised in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Right.
Where I spent all of my years growing up and attended school there as well. And decided in the early 80s that I wanted to go west. And so I moved to California, and I was actually at that time working with AT&T Information Systems.
You had finished your work in
Yes.
in Iowa, and you did an MBA, did
Yes,
you? You
yes.
were in Master's Business. Okay,
Yes.
right, I see, yeah.
I got both my undergrad and my graduate degree in Iowa.
Yeah, okay.
Then I decided to move
Go
west,
west, yeah.
right, exactly. And at that time I was working with AT&T.
Yeah.
And but I was looking for a way to get involved in some kind of humanitarian work of some kind. My parents had always raised me with this spirit of volunteerism and getting involved in your community and trying to help others. And so I was looking for something to get involved with and in. And one of the things that I discovered was that there was an agency called International Medical Corps, IMC, that did really great work overseas, and that they were looking for someone to join their agency. So I met the founder of the agency, who's an extraordinary person. His name is Dr. Bob Simon.
Okay.
And he started IMC as a result of the Soviet invasion in 1979. He actually became very concerned about medical conditions inside Afghanistan.
Right, in Afghanistan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he was the first American doctor since the invasion in '79 to actually enter Afghanistan and to try to give humanitarian assistance to the people inside the country who were really getting very little medical aid, if any, at the time.
And still aren't.
And so, right, exactly. And so I learned about Dr. Simon's work and wanted to meet him and met him, and I was just so impressed by his compassion and his vision. And it was what really struck me most about the agency that I thought was so important was the concept of self-reliance. A number of agencies at that time in Afghanistan were providing either direct relief, or they were working on the borders and they were helping the refugees, which were in great need of humanitarian services. But there was really very few groups working inside Afghanistan, and there were very few organizations that were able to focus on building up capacity and training.
Well, it was a war zone.
I know.
I mean, that's a tough place for anyone to go. I had a friend of mine who was a documentary maker, made a documentary called Jihad there for the BBC, and they actually lost people to a helicopter gunship rocket that blew up around them.
That's
you know, it was dangerous territory, and much of what the IMC does is engaged in difficult places at difficult times, and so that's a thing. I wonder if I could. You took an MBA and you went in. You were going to do AT&T. You were going to do business, but you were also interested. That was at a personal level. Was the training, and where does it fit in? It's such a broad, generic question. The training, an MBA training in business and so forth, applies or equips you well to be able to deal with the challenges of managing non-profit entities? Or do we see a big difference in consciousness or in methodology between the for-profit world that I would presume the business program would be touting, as it were, and the non-profit? And maybe you could share from your vantage point the distinction between those two views of the world and the management capabilities that apply well to the people who help bring those entities along.
Sure, okay. Well, there are some similarities, and of course there are major differences. One of the biggest differences is the fact that nonprofits are very dependent and reliant on volunteerism and on the goodwill of people. people who both give their money and give their time. And the boards of directors are all volunteers. And many of the relief workers are volunteers, or at least the short-term workers. And so there is a strong element of volunteerism. On the other hand, from, I guess, a management perspective,
Yes.
there are many similarities. Nonprofits have to be organized.
Yes.
They're expected to be efficient. They're expected to manage resources effectively. They've got, their financial systems have to be in place. They've got their audits. They have to be accountable to the public for the money that they spend. They have to be fairly well organized, and especially international agencies are fairly sophisticated when it comes to technology and communications, et cetera,
Yes.
because of the fact that they have offices in all these remote places of the world, and they have to communicate in those offices.
Yeah.
So technology has actually played a major role in how both for-profits and also nonprofits have operated.
Yeah.
So there are similarities,
Yeah.
and there are challenges because of the fact that nonprofits don't always have the resources to perform at the standards that they're expected to perform. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not easy to raise resources, and it's a constant struggle for every agency.
Yeah, and in a generic sense, if you have a business plan, you are going to make, let's just say, for instance, an investment in plant and equipment or human resources that are going to pay for themselves out of their future earnings, and you
Right.
have a business plan
Right.
that is going to make sense in terms of the market and so
Right,
forth.
right.
So that has a certain kind of built-in advantage. And you say,
Right.
in the nonprofit world,
Right.
one wonders whether or not it's going to be organized sufficiently. Those
Right.
people, you're not going to be able to marshal human activity without the traditional incentives that drive the
That's
marketplace.
right. That's exactly
That's an
right.
important distinction
That's
in the
a-
world for us to understand.
Very important, and
Yeah.
and because of that, you rely on the goodwill of a lot of people, both at the board of directors level and in other areas as well.
And in your case, you have volunteers.
Yes, volunteers, and who really drive that. But you
Yeah.
can't rely completely on volunteers,
Mhm.
like in our situation,
Yes.
where because training is our biggest focus,
Yeah.
and that is really what really is our niche and what sets us apart.
Yeah.
And it's what drew me to the agency
Uh-huh.
when Dr. Simon first founded it. It was that whole concept of self-reliance and helping people to help themselves, and what better gift. But because of that, you have to have continuity in the
Yeah.
agency. You have to
Yeah.
have continuity in your programs.
Yeah.
So in many ways, the young unsung heroes in our agencies are the logisticians who are out there in the field for a couple years at a time setting up the systems, the administrators who have to make sure that doctors and medical supplies can get in and out safely, and they're there for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
of course,
God bless them. In
right,
tough situations.
in tough situations, and you have
Hard-won gains. Yeah.
right, right, and you have to have administrative infrastructures to support them, to give them the support they need so that they can get supplies in, so that they can
Yeah.
get doctors in. And so we're always challenged by balancing the resources we need to do
Yeah.
the position, to do the work right.
Right.
On the other hand, just like you said, there are no future earnings to count on.
Yeah.
So nonprofits like IMC are always in that position where you're constantly balancing the needs with the resources.
Yeah, some people would say that everything can be done by the market. There are some
Right.
people, laissez-faire, would say that, and everything can be done more efficiently without the bureaucracy of the nonprofit or the governmental
Right.
realm of
Right.
activity. And I guess that's one of the large philosophical questions that confront us
Yes,
in terms
yes.
of how we move ahead, particularly as the
Yeah.
technology becomes more and more relevant to production and that
Mhm.
sort of thing. But let's go in a little more detail if we can about, I see, you remember Dr. Simon, and then what is their the sort of scope of their activity? What is it that they actually
Sure.
do, and when did it get started? That sort of thing. Some of the
Okay.
nuts and bolts, and we do have a little piece of tape we want to show
Okay.
some of those unsung heroes out in the field who are
Mhm.
actually doing the work that we here are talking about. But yeah.
Okay. Well, we were, as I mentioned, Dr. Simon founded IMC in 1984,
Mhm.
and he put together a volunteer board of directors, a group of volunteers who was going to help him. And really the mission was to provide relief and humanitarian assistance, but especially training in underserved parts of the world,
Boy.
and which takes us often to many places that are underserved because of war and civil conflict. So we often work in areas where there's a lot of conflict and instability, and sometimes very dangerous.
I saw the list of the places where your
Yes.
people go, and it's all the places that are the most difficult in the world. Afghanistan,
right,
Rwanda, these
right.
kind of places. You go
Right.
to where the challenge is, and that was
Right.
his vision and charge, or that's where the need was,
Right.
particularly acute.
Right, and it's
Yeah.
absolutely,
Mhm.
and certainly if there wasn't civil contact, maybe the maybe there had been economic devastation.
Yeah.
So there's some places that we're working where there may not be active conflict, but there's been economic devastation, as I mentioned, or people just don't have the skills that they need to help their own communities and be independent of humanitarian assistance. So what we try to do is we work very much with the local population and try to help them and empower them so that they don't have to be dependent on agencies like IMC long term.
So teach a man to
Yes,
fish and
yes.
he, you know, a pole, and they give him a fish and let him grab the pole that he can do it for himself.
Right.
It's a thing. Is there any connection between what you're doing or you see you're doing, and it is the medical corps. It's not the general relief. I mean, but we could talk about people sometimes need food and other kinds of things. But that, and then is there is that an important distinction? You know.
Well, health. I mean, we do medical work, but our broadest scope would be considered health. And nutrition.
That'd be nutrition, yeah,
right,
sure.
falls under health,
Yeah.
which is why we sometimes get involved in famines. If there, say there's a famine and there's not sufficient assistance going in, we will of course help. What we do is based on the local environment, what the needs are. We'll do an assessment. We'll determine, okay, what are the most important needs? How do we cut infant mortality, or how do we help people? And then we will put together a series of programs designed and tailored to help those specific needs. So our overall mission is to provide that training and self-reliance in the context of general health. But that might mean that we're training immunizers. That might mean on the tape in Somalia, you'll see we are doing therapeutic feeding. That might mean that we're training trauma surgeons, or we might be working with midwives. So it's kind of across the whole spectrum of health in its broadest sense.
Oh, and when we say you're talking now, you have medical professionals, you have nurses, you have health care workers, and then you also enlist to a considerable extent people from the area in order to help train them so they can carry on and help build this infrastructure. Is that anything like parts of what is sometimes called community development concept?
Yes, absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely.
That's important.
And in fact, IMC, we define ourselves fundamentally as a relief and development agency.
Relief and development.
Because we're providing direct humanitarian assistance in situations where there's active conflict. But we're fundamentally a development agency because of IMC's training initiatives. So we do both. IMC has done a lot of development activities in what would be considered to be relief environments only. And so rather than just
that was your original charge?
That was our original
charge. It was a relief thing where there was extraordinary situation that was being responded to, a crisis. Bosnia you've been in and so forth. And
where IMC was providing training in environments where you might consider you can't get anything done but provide direct assistance. We were finding ways to not only provide direct assistance, but to train local populations independent of us so that we could turn our programs over to local populations, and so that they're run by the people of that village or of that country.
Now you're private.
Yes.
It's a private entity. We used to have and we still do, I guess, the Peace Corps that did this in the name of the United States government. Distinction between the two? Or
well, it's a governmental agency, the Peace Corps. IMC actually gets a lot of volunteers and relief workers come out of Peace Corps in the early days.
Volunteers, they were volunteers.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, a number of them actually got their first experience internationally with the Peace Corps and working through the Peace Corps, and often that many times defines what they want to do with the rest of their lives, or at least a part of it. So a number of the relief workers that IMC brings on board have a Peace Corps background.
They do. And that's a certain kind of consciousness that those people tend to have. I don't want to say idealistic, concerned with human needs rather than maybe the lures of the market or something. You know what I'm saying? It's a kind of volunteer, I guess it's a volunteer consciousness that there might be more of that and more of that could solve practical, real, intractable problems than some people might tend to think. Those who think that it's all subject to market forces. There's more people willing to volunteer in the name of a good cause than one might think. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if we could give some support to the people that are trying to put those things together.
Right. And what
it's a big political question.
Well, I think in many ways. I think fundamentally people are looking for ways to make a contribution back to society somehow.
You think they are?
Yeah, I do. Now maybe for a relief worker to go overseas and spend 6 months or a year That's a significant contribution, and
Certainly
that's more than
is.
most people can do.
Yeah,
But there are other ways.
put themselves in harm's way often.
I agree.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree. But
yeah.
there are other ways that people get involved,
Yeah.
and it might be in something at the community level. It might be helping an international agency in other ways. IMC has people who support us in other ways. They don't necessarily need to go and put them in harm's way. They help us raise money. They give a voice to the issues that we're concerned about. They help bring about say awareness of IMC programs. All those things work together, and they're just as important to the work that we do in the field.
Now, the existence of the IMC and so forth, does that testify to the fact that we have systems around the world? We split the Peace Corps, we have public health services, we have these kind of things, that there is a breakdown, or there is a less than optimum functioning of our either politically or a sovereign state or different parts of the world area, that they're not working well, that we need to do this? Because if the world were working well and each country had a good public health infrastructure and they had everything, there wouldn't be a need for IMC, right?
Well,
and is the need growing through time? Was there a time when it was not as acute or as seen to be as acute as Dr. Simon saw and so forth? And what is the trending in that direction in terms of the broad structure of the world system that would provide as a matter of course in everyday living the health and development needs that you're trying to fill with this relief effort?
Okay, very good point. In 1984, when Dr. Simon founded IMC, there was, the UN counted, we call them complex emergencies, by the way. These hot spots that we're talking about are called complex emergencies. There were, at any one time during that period of time between 84 and 88 or 89, there were 5 ongoing complex emergencies at one time, only 5. Then, of course, came the end of the Cold War and a lot of other changes in the world. And last year, the UN documented 42 ongoing.
Toledo.
So
they hadn't changed the criteria, or they hadn't.
No. It's actually
So that reflects reality,
right,
a deterioration in the reality.
That's right. That's right. And certainly we've gotten.
Unfortunately.
Right.
And the trending, as we sit and talk here, the first year of
well,
the new millennium?
It's that it's. Sometimes I feel that it's getting worse. I mean, when
you
look at the because there's a lot of regional problems,
there
political
certainly
problems,
are.
And then you have the vulnerable part of the population, 80% of them women and children.
Yeah.
But they're basically innocent civilians who are caught in that crossfire and have no real say in the political mechanisms of their country. And they're the ones who suffer. And IMC programs are designed to reach those people and to help them and to help empower those communities. But it is, if you look at the world, you pick up a newspaper, I mean, there's a lot of problems in the world.
It must be frustrating in a certain sense in this sort of thing where you have a humanitarian, a real, honest to goodness, humanitarian concern for our fellow human beings. And we know we have, in an abstract level, these incredible technologically given new capabilities. The genome, we can fight all these things, all these disease, all these. It's frustrating to somehow there is a mismatch between what we collectively know we are capable of doing. There's goodwill also there, and the systems that somehow thwart or don't allow the humanitarian spirit to manifest itself in a positive and growing way on this planet. They used to say something's rotten in Denmark. Something's wrong on planet Earth that we don't have a system that allows the trending to be one that is allowing for an emerging, just in an everyday sort of sense, just and appropriately organized world, isn't there? Or is there?
Well,
how do we deal with that?
Well, I think that if you look at the world, I mean, there's so many of them are at different points in their own evolution. So many countries. A number of them, frankly, I think have gone back politically as far as their political systems. I think that some of this is due to just human behavior and the cycles that come about. Unfortunately, I mean, just human beings in general, we're not necessarily all in agreement on the best way to handle things and do things.
Just look what happened in Durban on the racist kind. They had all kinds of dissension.
Right,
well, I'm sorry,
right, exactly. So, I mean, trying to get people together collectively and getting them to agree on anything is so difficult.
But it's always been difficult, and the trending. Now we thought, if I may, I don't want to go in great depth. We want to get to the to the actual work on the ground and everything. But we thought here we had this dialectic going with the Soviet socialist challenge to the globalizing, market-oriented kind of capitalism thing, and that ended. And we thought, well, that's going to make, and still, it's building, but, you know, we're going to have these protesters going to Washington and the IMF. We had Genoa, this sort of thing. And so there's something, we haven't got, that victory didn't bring a system that is sufficiently able to give us trends that show us that we're moving in the right direction in terms of a collective engagement and the healthy engagement of the world. We need a qualitative transformation, perhaps, from that which is so easily accepted by people who are ensconced within the status quo vision of things.
I think
or
that,
are you revolutionary in your vision?
Well,
how do you see things?
I would say, go back to a point
I don't mean
that
to
you
put
made.
you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I don't mind. I'd like going back to what you said, moving in the right direction. I think the problem we have throughout the world is that we don't agree necessarily
on what the right direction is. Right, I see.
You and I might agree, but there is not general agreement anywhere. And then in many countries, those who feel that their country's being moved in the wrong direction, whatever that might be, resort to violence. And it's a result of that, increasingly resort to violence. And it's a result of that violence that humanitarian agencies like IMC get involved, because so often many of the people who are victims of that violence don't even have a voice in that political process or that economic process. And they're the ones on the receiving end of a lot of the brutality.
And you're the one. They're the ones to whom you try and bring relief. And also to help empower them.
Exactly.
So I think clear of political things. You don't steer. You say be agnostic politically. So you'll go into an area like it must be difficult to work in Afghanistan, where I know you have activity and so forth, with some of the attitudes of the Taliban and so forth.
It's very difficult.
They got the people for teaching Christianity now they're going to put in the block. It must be difficult to do that.
Very difficult. We work in very difficult political situations.
The toughest spots in the world, from what I can see.
It's tough. In Somalia, when we were working there in the early 90s, the clan structure in Somalia was one of the trickiest things we've ever navigated. And there were I don't know, almost 100 different clans, but there were 27 major clans based out of the city of Mogadishu itself, where we had to stay neutral and still navigate our way so that we could help the people, because that was our goal. The politics are very tricky, and certainly it can be very dangerous.
One last question along these lines. Are you generally optimistic? It's a cliche question. Optimistic, pessimistic of the human prospect as you survey what is going on now and the trends over the last, say, 20 years or so?
I think generally I'm optimistic. I do believe that some of these things are going to take time. I think that, there's a whole old cliche, 3 steps forward, 1 step backward. I think we see a lot of that, and we see more of it since the end of the Cold War.
Well, okay, we're seeing 3 steps forward, 1 step backward, not seeing 1 step forward, 3 steps backward.
I don't think so.
Okay, fine. Well, listen, let's spell out some of the details. You got programs going all over. Where are some of the places? Who are the people on the ground in the field, and what are they doing? And then, of course, you're president CEO out of Los Angeles. You're doing that. But talk about some of the people out in the field. Who are they? What are they doing? And
come from all different walks of life. Our relief workers in fact, you'll see on the tape, might be a pediatrician from Colorado, might be a doctor from Kansas City. I mean, literally all walks of life. Some of them have at the end of their career, and they've retired, and they want to do something, and they want to give back. We have a number of people who are in their 70s and 80s and want to give back somehow, having had a very successful medical career in the States. They'll go overseas. We also have people...
They'll go overseas like the Peace Corps.
Yes.
Remember President Carter's mother joined the Peace Corps at a late advanced age. Yeah, go ahead.
And also, so all ages, we get a lot of young people. Pardon me?
It's similar to the spirit of the Peace Corps that was blowing in the wind back in the 60s and 70s?
Well, I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, that's to another area.
I was born, but I'm not quite sure at the time.
I know.
I do know we work a lot with ex-Peace Corps people now. But basically, people from, I guess, similar in the sense that people from all walks of life. We get people from every age, different motivations, but primarily they want to give something back. So they make tremendous sacrifices. They might give up their medical practice, or that person might be, a logistician or a communications expert. As I mentioned, many of them are logisticians and administrators. what they'll do is they'll go work in an area where there's no running water, no electricity. They'll stay there for 6 months, a year, sometimes several years. They'll work in really tough conditions.
Often in harm's way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Often in harm's
where there's
way.
fighting going
right,
on.
Right,
Yeah,
active fighting often.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
always, but
Yeah.
but often.
Very often really strongly motivated, hate-filled fighting
Right,
going
that's
on.
right.
The
that's
place
right.
you don't want to go.
Right, but the
Yeah.
rewards that,
Yeah,
you know,
all
they
right.
always say
Yeah.
the rewards are so personal to them. So often we will have a person sign up and they'll stay, say, a year, and then it's time to go back, say, to the United States if we sent them from here, and they'll say, you know, I've had such a rewarding experience, I want to take one more year and do this again. A lot of the relief workers that work with IMC are people who've been with us for many years, go overseas thinking they're going to maybe be there 6 months or a year, and return back to their native country. It could be somewhere in Europe or somewhere else, and many years after they expected to return, primarily because they enjoy the work and they feel that they're really having an impact, that
It's
they're
not a
getting
small
something done.
thing. If you can find a place where volunteer or whatever, you get a, I guess what makes for happiness is hard to say. They talked about this in the Plato's day. They probably did it in the Cro-Magnon caves, I suppose. They were talking about it. But if you have something that gives you a sense of identity from what you're doing and a sense of empathetic appreciation, that's not a small matter.
That's right.
You know?
You are
There's
so
too much
right.
cynicism.
Right. I mean, a sense of purpose.
Yeah, a sense of purpose and
That's
a sense of identity. Identity is really important to the human psyche, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so while if a person could, you know, they might spend a month, most people spend at least 6 months to a year, but they all do talk about that, Harold. They talk about that sense of what I'm doing matters, and I feel good about that.
And it's helping somebody.
Right.
I mean, it's doing good, yeah. And there should be, and it's voluntary, which puts it on a certain side of an equation. And there should be more such institutions available for the expression of the human spirit, other than having, in my sense, more than trying to put every human emotion and everything into some commoditized marketplace thing. I mean, that seems a big challenge in front of us. But where did they come? They come from all over. How many are there? They're coming from all over the world. It's U.S. based, but they're coming, and they're medical people, because it is the medical corps. So it's called the medical corps. Who makes up the people? How many are there? Where are they? And where do they come from? And
all over the world.
To that tape.
Certainly I should say the U.S., all throughout Europe, South America. Literally, we have people from all over the world.
These are trained medical people?
Medical and, as I mentioned earlier, logisticians, administrators, accountants, managers, people who can manage a program. That's very important to operate in life.
Well, the organization called International Medical Corps.
There's
what
about
percentage
200
of the people that make that up, that are doing work in the field or in the thing, would be either medically trained doctors or nurses or something like that?
We have about 250 people that are expatriates, people we send from one country overseas. We have about 750 or so local people, so people from the population who will stay there after we've left. So close to 1,000 people based overseas. I would say that roughly 2/3 of them are health professionals.
They are,
and the other 1/3 are people who have other areas of expertise.
That's a lot of people. What's been the rate of growth over the time you've been in existence since '84, and what do you project, and what can you project, and how well are you able to project, and what do you need to be able to project a larger number of people? Resources, I suppose. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we've grown actually quite a bit. In '84, and when I started in '86. We had one program. It was about $1 million of services operating, as we mentioned earlier, inside Afghanistan. We had that was a tough place then. It's still a tough place, unfortunately. But at that time we had about 10 people based overseas, and just a couple in Los Angeles. Now, as I mentioned, we have close to 1,000 people based overseas.
That's a lot.
Working about 20 countries, and last year we delivered about $30 million in program services.
Mazel tov. Great. That's really good. You were able to do, and you had a piece in there that you had a great number of medical supplies that could go to Bosnia, but you had to get the support to transport the stuff.
That's right.
So these kind of things is something that's your responsibilities to do. That's growing, and you have an optimistic trend in terms of the the trending you can see as you look out ahead 1, 2, 3, 5 years and so forth? There seems to be more interest growing in
Yes,
the activity?
I think so. I think so. I mean, international assistance has never really received the kind of interest from a philanthropic standpoint, and from getting the dollars.
It has geopolitical implications,
Yes,
other
I know.
than just geostrategic.
Right.
You've been a guest at the White House with
Yes,
Mr.
yes,
President Clinton,
right,
and
right.
they've reviewed this, and there's interest at
Right,
those high levels.
right.
because
Yes, absolutely.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It has a,
There's
it's not just philanthropic in the sense of helping in the name of charity.
Right.
It's got a mission that is very relevant to just the organization of the world.
Because of the places we operate, IMC often has an on-the-ground perspective
Yes,
of what's
of
really
course.
going on and what
Yeah.
and so, you know, we've been invited a number of times by the White House and to discuss what do we see on the ground, what are the needs, et cetera. You're right, because of the geopolitical interests and the strategic interests that the U.S. may have. They don't always, but sometimes they do. But there's, and the American public is also very giving, and they're very sympathetic when they see a starving child. They're very sympathetic to the crisis of the day. The problem is international assistance doesn't receive the same attention, say, that agencies that are operating and serving just people in the United States receive, because of course it's in your backyard, you see it, it's, So it's a little bit harder to garner a person's attention beyond the headlines onto the needs of the world internationally.
Yeah, it's hard to get that into the news to get international. It's, you know, it's just because it's all some tabloidization of some movie star's angst when she was a teenager or something. I mean, in the name of what's called news, and the international's not there.
Right. I do think that's changing a little bit, though.
You
I
do?
do think it's growing.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. And you've seen a number
I
of...
hope you're right.
Yeah.
C-SPAN helps.
Yes, and also I think people are a little bit more and more aware of what's happening in the rest of the world, and I think that it's getting more coverage beyond just the headlines, beyond the emergency crises of the day. I think there tends to be a little bit more, and so I hope that will
Well, God bless you and the people that you're working with in terms of putting that help out to where it's direly needed in a very rapid kind of deployment way that you is also a mark of what you're doing. But listen, Nancy, it's really interesting. I could talk to you for 27 hours easy, you know, on this subject, but we have this tape. Let's not lose it, right? Because they have a tape. It's pretty long. It's about 9 minutes or so, and it's a compilation of some of the things, the news reporting that's been in the press, and then it shows some of the people in the field. So why don't we set that up and run it now?
Okay,
and then we'll come back. And we're talking now with Nancy Aossey, and she is the president and CEO of the organization, the very, very wonderfully important organization called the International Medical Corps. So if we could set that up in the studio and run that tape now then, and then we'll be coming back at the end of that. Thank you. Run the tape now then, please. Thank you.
Organization whose unique mission is to assess a country's needs, establish emergency relief programs to meet those needs, then setting up training programs to achieve self-reliance in some of the most dangerous and war-torn places on Earth.
A 7-year-old girl with a gunshot wound in her leg, one of the daily war casualties in the hospital in Baidoa.
We're absolutely overwhelmed. The casualties that have been pouring in, it's one of those situations where you feel that as much as you're doing, it's still not enough.
At the few remote clinics still operated by the Americans, hundreds of the sick, injured, and dying wait days for medical care. There are no gases for anesthesia, few clean bandages, no sterile dressings, and no narcotics for pain. Hardest hit are the children.
They have seen things no child should ever witness, spared none of the horrors that drove their parents from their homes. Of the 100,000 people taking shelter in Kukes, 60% are children, hardly one that isn't suffering from deep psychological trauma and stress.
Every day, the doctors see the parents cry, and the doctors cry with them. They cry out of pity for the suffering of the children who die. For us, trying to save these children's lives is extremely difficult, very, very tough. We're overworked and overwhelmed. We keep working to save their lives.
If we don't take care of them, nobody will. And it's kind of hard to leave when that's the situation. You know what I mean?
This is the children's ward of a local hospital. We came here to talk to the doctors and the relief workers. They tell us that any number of these children are just hanging by the thread of life.
Would you just help me? Don't let the baby fall. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
A group of doctors and nurses are risking their lives going to war-torn countries like Bosnia to offer aid to the sick and wounded. They call themselves the International Medical Corps.
One group of Americans has already answered the call for medical assistance in war-torn Rwanda. They're members of the International Medical Corps.
Since 1993, American doctors from the International Medical Corps, or IMC, have been waging their own war, a battle to restore medical care to this war-torn country.
Dr. Bill Holmes is a surgeon from New Hampshire. He's operating on the front lines with little help and without running water.
You reinvent the wheel every day.
Really?
Yeah, because some of the things that the textbooks would tell you to do, you can't do. You know, what do you do with someone who needs a big operation, but there's no blood, or there's no electricity?
Surgeon Jeff Collier, involved in 30 wars and disasters in the last 10 years. In his clinic, he sees 200 deeply disturbed children each day and is now trying to fund a program to help them. 8-year-old Bahari is typical.
They shot his uncle, and he saw it?
His uncle.
Okay, and he saw it?
Yeah, he saw that now.
As bad as things are, they'd be a lot worse without volunteers like Dr. Gene Michaels, 71-year-old retired orthopedic surgeon from Southern California.
Okay, you let me have the baby, I'll fix it.
Dr. Michaels came here with the International Medical Corps, a group training Somali doctors to treat the wounds of war and save the lives of those who were starving to death.
We had a mother and 2 daughters, 2 young adults. They came in, staggered in, and we put them in hospital, fed them, and they all died.
Gunshot?
Yeah.
Commonplace.
Commonplace.
2-month-old Sad Galopini was only 2 weeks old when his parents were forced out of Kosovo. Today, he has an ear infection, and in a schoolroom serving as a makeshift medical center, he'll be treated by doctors dealing with their own pain. Elfede Kutlusa and Mohammed Kapsingi are Kosovo refugees who 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, go from the dismal conditions of refugee camp to refugee camp, dispensing medicine and friendship.
I'm really happy because I can help. But I'm really sorry that they need help.
The doctors are part of the Los Angeles-based International Medical Corps, an agency that through volunteers and donations from American medical companies offers help in world trouble spots.
In most countries you will find that the medical community are gone. So you have all that's left are untrained or technical staff.
So IMC imports physicians and nurses to train their Bosnian counterparts. During the war, victims entered an emergency room of untrained staff, and for some, that meant certain death. Today, IMC is changing that. This little girl was hit by a car. American doctors work side by side with Bosnian residents, including 28-year-old Dr. Alma Mekic. Unconscious and in shock, doctors wage a battle to keep the little girl alive. The drama unfolds as Dr. Alma is trained to insert a chest tube to help drain fluids and blood.
Before we went there, that resident, the local resident, would never have been able to do it. So had IMC not been there, that child would be dead.
Dr. Larry Stock reaches out to those who fall through the cracks. Kosovo refugees like this old woman, without family and too weak to take care of herself.
Put her stick in her hand so she has something to do with her hands.
In these vast refugee camps, many of the elderly are also orphaned, with nowhere to go, their families killed.
These are people who have fallen through the cracks of this incredible humanitarian relief effort that's gone on. People like this have been left behind and have just been forgotten
For Somalis, Baidoa is a place of death. For the Americans of the International Medical Corps, it is a training ground for sainthood. In August, we met Teresa Hinkle, who treated sick and dying children as if they were her own.
I can do it. It's going to try to give them a little bit of water, but it's not going to do anything more.
Meet her successor.
I'm a pediatrician.
And it's Dr. Mickey?
It is.
What's your
like
first name?
Mouse. Mickey, that's my first name.
She runs the children's ward with a virtually unheard of dedication to her patients.
She had a bomb blast and had her leg, she's got an awful fracture and draining pus, so, but mother wasn't around, she didn't have any blood and she was bleeding out, so I decided I would give some blood for this little girl.
These are antibiotics, bandages, gauze, surgical gowns. We've run out of everything. We have not been able to work in sterile conditions. We've not had anesthetics to perform surgeries. We've not had basic things such as hospital rags, and these supplies are going to help a lot. Our surgical teams there get to the point where sometimes they just can't work because they don't have the supplies they need.
We don't have that many people in our team. The people wait a long time to be seen, and it's always hard for us when we have to leave at the end of the day, having sent 50 to 100 people away who are still sick and knowing they won't be served until the next week.
The war has cut Burundi's lifeline to the outside world. Medical supplies are in short supply. Some relief groups have pulled out. And here in Muyinga, all but one of the local doctors have run away.
I just wanted to come and see what I could do to help out. I really mean it. I want to do what I can to help his people.
Every doctor I talked to said the mission of the IMC was not to take over the system here, but to help the Somali people put things back together. They enjoy working side by side with the Somali doctors, and they learn something in return.
You could see in their face, in some very deep, profound way, they feel cured.
This old man says his 4 sons were killed in Kosovo. He escaped with his wife, now too infirm to move. For the first time in weeks, he says, he feels safe.
Thank you. You are very nice.
Every individual is worth saving, worth helping, worth trying to figure out what's going on.
Wow. 1 boy and 2 boys.
To Severina Barra, these twins are miraculous.
Hey.
Her first 2 pregnancies ended with stillbirths.
So, Mickey, is there a better chance that these 2 will survive because they're at your hospital?
I think so. But they both look really very healthy, and I think she will do well. We will start her off on breastfeeding and get the kids immunized, and I think we'll have a much better chance.
Like all the doctors and nurses of the International Medical Corps, Mickey Risher is paid in unexpected ways.
To see the happiness on their faces, to see the kids walk out of here. We have kids carried in that end up walking out. That's great, actually.
Bye-bye, guys.
Dr. Risher is struggling to keep a fragile health system alive. Why do you do this?
Because I love it here. The challenge, the medical challenge of trying to figure out what people have is really very, very exciting, very hard to do. I can just go and take care of people that need to be taken care of.
Malnourished little baby.
Is that the way medicine should be?
That's the way medicine should be.
That's really good. That's the way medicine should be, she said. You know, that has a great deal of the work actually that's going on out there. Really, they're sung to a degree, but should be more well sung and not unsung. The people that are working out in those areas. Congratulations on that, and all the people that are involved in as far as public access cable television here in New York is concerned. Right?
Oh, thank you.
Bless you all. Now, what can we do in order to help people? Help you, or what can be done in a general sense in terms of helping this kind of activity, which is filling this great human need, into the future? As always, I suppose we need to have outreach in terms of education about what the possibilities are, volunteers, but we also need to have some sort of way of systematically supporting these kind of efforts in the name of not only humanitarian relief, but also as that conference in Durban showed and so on. We're at an existential crisis. We need to find some sort of a system that's going to allow us to provide these capabilities that we collectively have among the whole of the human society. And it's not just a nice thing. It's really almost an essential thing. And how can we support these kind of pioneering efforts such as ICM and other good efforts like that? I guess IMC. I suppose we need support always. I mean,
yes,
financial
yes,
support.
yes,
And that
right.
sort of thing. You're in the driver's seat or in the responsible seat. So what do you say? Not only for IMC, but for sister and these kind of efforts that are able to continue to operate in the world now, and maybe some that are coming along.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you again for having us on your show today, because the public awareness is so important. But just as you said, for us, raising money is especially critical because of the fact that it is so important that Americans and that we as a community stay engaged in what's happening in other countries, and to help with the suffering and to help rebuild the infrastructure, and raising money to support those efforts is one of our biggest needs.
Yeah.
We get a tremendous amount of support, but of course not enough, from various donor agencies. We work very closely with the World Health Organization.
Okay,
we work closely with the U.S. government. We're supported by them. We're supported by European governments as well.
Government's a big thing. How for what is it? National Institutes for Health or
the United States?
How is it filtered out through the government?
It's
federal
through
government
USAID,
system?
which is the
USAID,
United States Agency for International Development, and through PRM, which is the humanitarian arm of the State Department.
You don't have National Institutes of Health or anything like
that?
They don't see you doing research. It's not. It can't be
So
seen
we do,
as research.
Right.
It seems to me you're doing research. I mean, it's researching solutions.
Right. Well, it depends on what.
Yeah.
And a lot of foundations have supported us. Mellon Foundation, based right here in New York.
And
the Gates Foundation is one of our
The Gates Foundation?
Yes, yes.
You could.
But frankly, some of the most important support are those private individuals who want to get involved and simply write a check and send it in.
Right. That's good. Well, that's good. You have support from the medical professional community, AMA.
No, not officially. No,
not
no.
officially.
No, they don't. We have members
profession.
Right.
You have members.
Yeah, individual members of the medical profession in general support us, either through giving or giving their time overseas.
Pharmaceutical industry, do they support? Do they support with in-kind donations or something like that? And do they do it?
Right.
Big thing in Africa is AIDS now. 17 million have died.
Right.
Big challenge. UN's trying to get behind that.
Right.
Are you considered in that bailiwick, as it were?
Absolutely. And a big part of the HIV/AIDS problem has to do with the healthcare infrastructures that need to be surrounding those communities where you deliver.
Isn't that what you've been doing
that's
for
what we do.
some couple decades now or something like that?
That's right.
So yours could be an international kind of model that could help.
Right. And to help build those infrastructures so that you can take care of AIDS patients and so that you can help prevent HIV/AIDS to begin with. We work a lot on the preventative side too.
You do work on the preventative side?
Yes.
In all these things we're dealing
both on the treatment and the preventative side of all these things.
Right.
Sometimes it depends on where can we have the most impact? What is the most cost-effective way for us to be part of a solution? And it depends. Every community is different. Every village is different. Our models are always built around what is most appropriate for that country or that village or that community.
Yeah, right. And then that is is the trending? So that's something that is needed. There should be more. Do you have the people that are in the field, the footage you have, the people actually doing the work in the field is very effective in a sense, or much less, because they're delivering a good, if it were, in a service that is really valuable. Is there an adequate verite or monitor or filming of what you're doing and that sort of thing? Do they don't have a little camera where they could, we're in television, so we're trying to think those pictures are very effective. Have you used internet or the emerging global communication systems and everything to your advantage, or the television systems? Do you do that kind of thing yourself in terms of public outreach at the headquarters, maybe in Los Angeles or something? And we're in California. We have all that Hollywood talent.
That's right.
There could be the movie actors and so forth could get involved.
Well, we've certainly made a lot of progress in the last year or two. I mean, just developing a website, keeping it current.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to, technology has opened so many windows to the world, and has allowed us all the opportunities. It allows other people and other agencies. But it is changing, and it's like we were talking about earlier before the show. Technology is coming on so quickly, and you want to utilize it to do what you're doing more efficiently. But it changes so quickly, it's not always easy for us, and we don't always have the resources to do the latest and the greatest things. But we have been utilizing technology in ways that we weren't able to before. For instance, your question about pictures. Sometimes just getting footage or photos overseas was always so difficult.
Send it on
I
the
mean,
internet.
right now we just email it through the internet.
Wonderful? Ain't it
And
something?
right, and the resolution isn't quite as crisp, but it's good enough for publication.
Right.
And so now
It's
we're
gonna
able
get
to
better.
do right. That's right.
Yeah.
And we're able to do so much more of that because we can do everything through email now. I sometimes wonder how we function or how we existed without the internet.
Took 3 months to get a letter from London in George Washington's time, I think.
Right.
You know, on the old clipper ship, or they didn't have clipper ships then. Yeah, it's a revolution of communications going on. We're interested in communication.
Yes,
and communication works. You're in Hollywood, you're in L.A. How does it happen to be you're in L.A., if I may? And is it possible to take, to get the support, because we are, for good or ill or whatever, however way you see it, in a public understanding kind of sense, so so enamored of celebrities and movie. And you're out there. Can you get the support of the creative community in Hollywood to say, look, I think this is a good idea, and you get the name of a great, well-known movie personage or something, and you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. It's not so easy to do. It's something we've tried to do in the past, and it's certainly something we're still working on doing.
Doesn't work? People don't
No, it's just that, no, it's just not, it's just difficult. But certainly it would help us a lot. We have had some support out of Hollywood and in the way of even technical services and whatnot. And certainly it's a great opportunity for us.
Well, I tell you,
but, you know, it's finding the right spokesperson. It has to match with their area of interest and whatnot. It can.
You got to get some of those producers that are interested in maybe Spielberg or somebody doing a movie built around the experience of some of your people in the field. I was a male nurse in Afghanistan, or I was a female nurse, even worse, in Afghanistan in the midst of the a movie. I mean, around these. Because you're at the edge of cultural forces, and right in the place where the action is in terms of the interfaces that would be called for.
That's right.
But you get support of that. Well, there's a big challenge in front of us in terms of that you're trying to fill. It becomes more. There's more and more challenge. How is it decided? What is the process by which it's decided that we are going to go to point? You're going to go with your people to point A rather than point B or C or D, when there are so many problem areas. How do you decide? How do you narrow it down?
Well, part of it is access. Part of it is whether we have access to this particular area. Sometimes it's a regional decision. For instance, when we were working in Angola originally, you know,
really?
I mean, we had a base that was our first base in Africa. Therefore, we were able to position ourselves to go into Somalia, which was actually in East Africa, but it was still a continent. Right, and then we were able to expand regionally. It's based, you know, we, like everyone, we have to prioritize based on our resources, based on access to those communities, and based on our ability to respond. So it's a combination of factors that go into place.
So you have a wage system where the more difficult and you wouldn't want to be there kind of criteria, that's where you'll go.
Right. That's
you'll go where no man fears to, all men fear to go is where you're likely to find you. It's, you know, that's a criteria that you draw. You don't have much activity on the French Riviera or something.
No.
Where you have all those nice coffee shops.
Right, that's right. So but it's not always necessarily a place of active combat. It might be an area that's just underserved, or that doesn't provide training. And so many times, you know, our focus is not to duplicate the efforts of anyone else.
Anyone else? Whose efforts would you be duplicating if you were to duplicate?
Well, we don't duplicate.
I know, but if they were, I mean, who?
There's relief and development agencies like CARE, World Vision, Save the Children, the International Rescue Committee. There's a number of agencies like that, and everyone has their own niche. And IMC is very careful to not duplicate those efforts or waste resources doing what something is already doing. And we're also very careful, to focus our efforts in a way that we're complementing maybe what's being done already, or maybe we're doing something that hasn't been done before because it was too difficult to do. And a number of agencies like Lutheran World Relief, sometimes they will have resources and we'll have a base in an area, so they will collaborate with us and they'll provide us resources and IMC will operate the programs.
I see.
So we work collaboratively with other agencies in many different ways. Sometimes we work side by side. Sometimes these agencies will provide the funding for something that we're doing. There's a lot of mutual respect among the different agencies, and everyone kind of has it. Yeah,
a lot of networking on an international scale.
Right.
Boy, you're right out there. You're really out there, probably a lot better, if I may just suggest, possibly than some of our most highly touted diplomatic representatives.
Right. Well, that's
if
often...
you understand what I'm saying, at a person-to-person level.
Right. That's why IMC often gets asked to provide briefings, say to the president or to the UN or whatnot, because we have ground staff who know the situation, they know what's going on, and we're in a position to talk about what we see from our perspective.
If it were to become a cabinet office in the... No, that's not right. I'm saying there should be... It's a tremendously important work that you're doing, and one wonders how it can be, put into the Secretary of International Health Development or something. Or
right. Well, and there are systems
some way it can be beyond 1,000. It could be let 10 million programs bloom. Something that that catch the spirit of the American people.
Well, the key is for the average American.
You call it. You think of it. It's international, but it's
we're an American-based agency. Absolutely. But we're international in scope.
Well, that's another big important interface and mixture of what's needed, a vision of in the world.
But you make a key point about the average American citizen. One thing that they can do other than say supporting international efforts is also talk to your local representative, talk to your congressman or woman about ways that the U.S. could be more engaged in international assistance.
How is the U.S. going to do that?
Because it doesn't have necessarily a natural constituency.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Even the World Health Organization is under attack, or that's an international thing, or the health. I mean, I just mentioned out of the side of my head, Laurie Garrett's got this indictment of the downfall of the public health service around on a planetary scale. It's a real problem with all these things coming up. We really need that. We don't have a Department of Health that it adequately does it, I mean, nationally, or even, is there enough support for the international efforts of the World Health Organization?
I've always thought America's a great country.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have the resources and the goodwill and the brain power to do both. We don't have to pick between the two. We are one of the greatest countries in the world.
But I think
we can do both.
I think so, but we need to have some sort of institutional structure that allows people to channel that good energy into effective activity, don't you think?
Yeah, but I think they exist. I do think they exist. I mean, the U.S. government has mechanisms through USAID and PRN at the state. And there are agencies like IMC who are ways that you can channel, your support or your efforts. And so I think they exist. I think I think the key is to get more people interested in international foreign assistance. I think that's the key.
You think,
because it's, as you know, I mean, especially with technology, it's more and more a global world where we're interconnected.
No doubt about it.
What
Global
happens
village.
in one area affects us, and a disease, an outbreak of Ebola in one country can affect us one day. So I think we are more interdependent, and it's America's best interest to care about what's happening in some of these other countries.
They say smallpox is being developed again, and anthrax, and these things, and it's really interesting, 100 trillion cells in a human organism, 100 trillion, they tell us, and they're all connected as a system.
Right, that's right.
So, I mean, something like that applies to the human society, and there needs to be some sort of a pattern, and then we should keep the faith until there can come to be a breakthrough that will make us sure, in a systems way, that the trend is in the right direction. And one would hope that we live in a time when that major kind of qualitative paradigm breakthrough might be ahead of us. And in the meanwhile, we should keep investing our attention and support to agencies such as yours, which is doing monumentally good work, and I really thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you
and I thank you really very much. And I remind you in the cable television audience here in New York that it's been your pleasure as the perceptions of Nancy Aossey. And she's CEO and president of this wonderful organization that we here certainly support and encourage you to do the same, the International